Modeling Cannabis for Excellence in Biomedicine and Equitable Wealth Distribution. In the context of a wave of cannabis decriminalization globally, this talk aims to highlight some of the issues relevant to the biomedical use of cannabis in the Caribbean through an Indigenous Caribbean scientific lens. It is a continuation of our earlier research on the Caribbean philosophy of biomedicine and seeks to put cannabis industrial and research development in the wider context of emerging paradigms of efficacy in the biomedical sciences and the opportunities offered therein. It also seeks to address some of the potential pitfalls as industrial and scientific development proceeds, including biopiracy and intellectual property theft, issues which affect traditional medicine in general. So what is this mysterious and controversial plant, cannabis? Well, the genus Cannabis L belongs to the Cannabaceae family in the plant kingdom. There are 3 species of Cannabis L: C. sativa, C. indica, and C. ruderalis. These species differ in their appearance as well as in their psychoactive effects. Hemp is a non-psychoactive strain of C. sativa that has been historically selected for strong fibers in northern climates. On the other hand, marijuana is psychoactive and can be any species, and has been historically selected for medicinal or bioactive effects, particularly in tropical climates. Which brings us to our first point. Cannabis is not a drug. Cannabis is a plant that can sometimes contain psychoactive compounds. There are over 700 known compounds in the cannabis plant, but the 2 groups of chemicals receiving the most attention currently are the cannabinoids and the terpenoids, both of which are found in the resin secreted by the trichomes in the buds, flowers, and leaves of the plant. Although there are 113 cannabinoids, the 2 that are of primary interest are THC, which has psychoactive effects, and cannabidiol, or CBD, which does not have psychoactive effects. Little is known about the terpenoids to date, but they are known to work synergistically with the cannabinoids to impact the psychoactive effects of the plant on the person taking it. There are several medical cannabis strains currently available, which are standardized for THC and/or CBD concentration. High THC strains, such as the Dutch bedrocan, are indicated for pain, multiple sclerosis, insomnia, stress, spasms, glaucoma, and appetite stimulation, whereas high CBD, non-psychoactive strains are indicated for epilepsy, psychosis, migraines, depression, and inflammation. The most famous of the high CBD strains is Charlotte's Web, named after Charlotte Figi, a little girl who was able to control her epilepsy with this strain of cannabis. In support of centuries of use for various ailments, modern medicine has found substantial evidence for the efficacy of cannabis to treat nausea, spasticity, pain, sleep disorder, and asthma, with mounting evidence for appetite stimulation, anxiety, PTSD, Alzheimer's, and glaucoma. Hemp, the non-psychoactive form of cannabis, also contains highly nutritious seeds from which hemp oil can be extracted, an excellent source of healthy fat. In terms of public health implications, high THC strains have been highlighted as underlying much of the risks associated with cannabis. But in the context of other drugs, cannabis is among the least addictive substances, about as addictive as caffeine. Cannabis has shown particular efficacy against opioid dependency in the context of the opioid epidemic in the U.S. One of the most often cited potential public health implications of cannabis use is increased schizophrenia risk. Several studies have linked adolescent use of high THC strains with psychosis. However, it is clear that those with predisposition to schizophrenia are more likely to be negatively affected by cannabis use, as is evident from the fact
that increasing THC concentrations over the years has not correlated with increased schizophrenia. Furthermore, the causative or mechanistic link between cannabis and psychosis has not yet been articulated. It may also be that the correlation between schizophrenia and cannabis use is due to self-medication with the plant by schizophrenics. All in all, there seems to be a complex multifactorial basis for schizophrenia, including genetic and environmental factors, and adolescent exposure to high THC strains of cannabis in predisposed individuals may be one impacting factor. And the possibility that schizophrenics might be using cannabis to self-treat brings us to another line of argument, that all cannabis use is medicinal, even when it's self-identified as recreational. In support of this argument, the recent discovery of the endocannabinoid system in the 1990s has identified a number of functions impacted by cannabinoids, from appetite to sleep to memory to stress. Activation of CB1 and CB2 receptors in the body by THC and CBD and other cannabinoids elicits these effects on the endocannabinoid system by mechanisms still in relatively early stages of research. Therefore, it is important to note that people who use cannabis recreationally often report using it to relax, sleep, increase appetite, aid with digestion, or increase sexual function. These are issues for which doctors routinely write prescriptions. Here in the Caribbean, where the cultural character of cannabis use is understudied, it has also been reported that people use cannabis as a work aid. Looking at the endocannabinoid system at the molecular level of receptors, it is becoming clear that the medicinal effect of cannabis is elicited via a complex synergy between the hundreds of phytochemicals in the plant, the so-called entourage effect. Much of the work looking at cannabis phytochemicals has focused on the mediation of the THC therapeutic effect by CBD, but all of the plant's many compounds, cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, act cooperatively and/or synergistically to elicit the medicinal effect that is particular to each strain. The issue, of course, is that the Western biomedical ontology or way of being is based on single molecule drugs, and they have tried to replicate this to a certain extent with cannabis compounds. Most of the currently available pharmaceutical cannabis products, except for the UK's Sativex, is composed of either THC or CBD. Moreover, it may be that there is an overfocus on these two cannabinoids in a context of hundreds of other plant compounds, which may undermine the potency of the entourage effect of medicinal cannabis. Similarly, the Canadian model consists of whole plant preparations of cannabis standardized for THC and CBD in, I must say, rather wasteful pillbox packaging. In this Western ontological interpretation of cannabis, specifically, and plant-based medicine generally, we cannot forget that cannabis is an example of traditional medicine honed through millennia of selective breeding and pharmacological application, and that it has been indigenous to the Caribbean and its people for a long time before commodification in the West. In the Caribbean, we have traditionally used whole plant preparations of cannabis to smoke, eat, drink, and rub for a number of ailments including pain, asthma, arthritis, and stress and anxiety relief. Therefore, cannabis is a sterling example of Caribbean traditional knowledge, defined as the know-how, skills, and practices that are developed, sustained, and passed on from generation to generation within a community, often forming part of its cultural or spiritual identity. Understanding the pioneering role that the Caribbean people have played in developing cannabis as traditional medicine is necessary in order to secure our intellectual birthright, ensuring protection of intellectual property and biodiversity for example by seed banking of heirloom strains, researching and cataloging herbal medicines, and ensuring, above all, community benefit and profit share. And if offered this appreciation of value and investment of resources, cannabis research can catalyze the expansion of biomedical research in the Caribbean. Already, the cannabis pioneers of Jamaica, like Professor Manley West, who brought the first cannabis pharmaceutical on the market in 1987, and Dr. Henry Lowe, who recently gained FDA orphan drug approval for his non-cannabinoid drug in 2018, have seen remarkable success in using cannabis to help develop Jamaican biomedical research and industry. Dr. Lowe has insightfully stated that our strategy is that although we could sell it and get some cash and do some other work, we would rather work with it and carry it on as far forward as we can, license it, and have some control. That is what we want to do. And because cannabis is a traditional medicine developed by and for the people, it has the potential to be an economic equalizer if modeled in a way that is just. Globally, this can be an opening for a flourishing and evolution of indigenous scientific ontologies in the Caribbean to cement its position in traditional medicine even beyond cannabis. There are a plethora of opportunities offered to Caribbean traditional and academic scientists alike in terms of analysis and preservation of heirloom cannabis varieties, which, if modeled purposefully, can lead to enhancement of biomedical research infrastructure. Locally, cannabis liberalization can lead to empowerment of farmers. And given the great toll that prohibition has had on so many young lives, cannabis must be modeled to enable reparation for ex-convicts via preferential access to the industry. Taxation and profit from the industry can be purposed toward the economic and social development of the Caribbean people, who have toiled and suffered to contribute much to medicinal cannabis as currently being codified in Western biomedicine. Modeling cannabis liberalization must reflect the reality that cannabis is a natural resource and traditional knowledge indigenous to the Caribbean people and canon. Local cannabis regulations cannot therefore perpetuate historical disparities. Respect and reparation must be given to those who have suffered under prohibition to develop the plant to its current state in which Western medicine now finds value. This includes Rastafari and traditional herbal practitioners and farmers. Most importantly, as exemplified by the Jamaican biomedical cannabis pioneers, Dr. Lowe and Professor West, it is the duty of Caribbean scientists to ensure community benefit for traditional medicine, even if it is not to the financial benefit of the individual scientist. This must be a key principle in codifying a Caribbean philosophy of biomedicine.